Hey everybody, Art 31 131 31 13131 here, and we are still in week 8. We're going to talk about assignment 21 and 22. So assignment 21 is kind of a fun one because it's animal drawing from an image. Whenever I start talking, these birds start chirping in my room, so I can't really get away from them at the moment. So you'll have to deal with the chirping birds and some jazz in the background. But let's talk about the animal drawings. Now, there's some really, you go to Bing, there's going to be some really awesome drawings in here. You can try to copy one. Let's say if you were doing this wolf or this kitten. The main thing is that you show a lot of contrast in light and dark tones. So you really want to darken up the dark areas and really lighten up the light areas, and have all the midtones in between those represented, which will be maybe 5 to 7 levels of midtones to the very darkest from the very lightest tone. Once you do that, it's going to really pop off the page. It's going to be a good drawing. Now, if you're not real good at it, pick something that's a little easier to do, possibly. Then a side view of the face, a 3/4 view is a little harder to do on an animal, but you can try it, go ahead and attempt it. Any one of these is good to do. Then you get back, scrolling down a little bit more, they get a little more, sort of maybe an easier subject matter to do, but still try to put the contrast in. Of course, you're going to have to work with fur, and that could be done in graphite in several ways with just shading, and then maybe some lines drawn in and erased out. Where highlights are, overtone, you erase out that tone, so that the very light highlight will show up even though you've toned something in maybe, or you want to take it out of some tone. You need to erase it out. Now, I mentioned the pen erasers. They actually eject a very thin, kind of a thick marker pen size eraser out the end, but that allows for a very sharp edge, pretty sharp, sharper than maybe your own eraser, the big clumpy one. So it can make erasing more specific wherever you want it. So you might want to look into getting one of those, or just like I say, cut out, snip off the end of your eraser so there's a sharp edge to part of it, and then use that when you want to erase out like fur or little lines. Otherwise, put that contrast in. I would say this doesn't have enough contrast. I would say that more midtones have to be in the face of this cougar. This is too light. So more midtones in the face, and then darken up the dark areas, and that's going to give it a lot more contrast, like something like this tiger. A lot more contrast. And then always when you're shading in the background, it allows for the highlights in your subject that you drew to come out. Where you have all that white paper back there fighting for presence with your highlights, they get lost. Anytime you darken up the background, the highlights come out, like in here. The highlights are very visible because that's all that's there for a highlight. There's no white paper to fight it. So that's definitely a good idea, to shade in your background. But when you do that, either make it darker than your subject or a little lighter than your subject. Still, you're getting rid of a lot of the white paper look, which is going to fight for presence with your highlights in your drawings. Now, you can shade in something that's kind of not really detailed. We don't know what's back here, but we figure there's a lot of stuff back there, maybe the brambles in the forest. Or you can actually shade in something, that's okay too, that's recognizable, but maybe not. Anytime you shade the background, you get rid of all that white, and then your highlights will jump out at you. Really creates more 3D appearance. Now this could be anything. It could be your pet, or one of these that you pick, but work from an image, not imagination. Because it's going to turn out better because you have a reference of how much tone, where the facial features are actually placed. You know, the tip of the head and stuff like that. But look for that contrast, because I'm going to come back at you and say, where's all the contrast? Like this wolf here. I'm sure his side of his face wasn't totally white as paper. I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, it's got, even at the very lightest tone on a wolf, it has some backed off like a creamy tan or something. That's going to be a tone. It's not going to be white as paper. There is a slight tone in the lightest part of that wolf. So this is kind of missing contrast because it doesn't have that right in here. So that's what you want to look for. Okay? We're gradually changing in from one tone to another, like these birds. Gradually changing and then all of a sudden getting lighter here, or not all of a sudden, gradually doing that, and then darker down here. Don't send me something like this. Don't send me that because it has no shading on it. Very little. Very little. I think the whole dog should have a tone of some sort. And then you start adding in the shading where the white, if that's a totally white dog, it's going to have something to show its shape. And keep your photo as a reference so you can send that to me, maybe straight away, with your first attempt at drawing your reference. Send it to me right away so I don't have to ask. Or if you think it's a pretty good drawing, you got all the contrast, you didn't make anything really white as paper, except for really, really where it belongs, which is probably pretty minimal, then go ahead and send that without a reference, and it's probably going to be okay. But most of the time, I do ask for references. And if you're wondering if your drawing is got all the elements to get an A grade, then send that reference as well. All right, let's talk about the homework, I call it, which is assignment number 22. And this is to draw something ugly, something that you ordinarily wouldn't draw, would never draw. And it's a discipline. So it's drawing something that you think is ugly and you wouldn't draw, but you have to draw it for the assignment. So it's like a discipline. I got to draw this, and I got to make it pretty good. I got to put all the contrast in. I got to get shading in there. I've got to use less lines. If there's no lines on the subject, bordering it. Same with your animals. Don't draw lines bordering things because they're not really there. There's no line drawn around a cat's head or something, or the wolf's head. It's all shading that meets other shading, and I'll say this all the time. So you might as well start working on it and get rid of the lines if they're not there. Don't put them in because you think you need it, because you really don't. If there's shading that meets other shading, that's going to define borders and edges without lines. So you really want to get away from putting lines in when they're really not there. You want realism. You put lines in, it starts looking cartoonish. Okay? So don't put the lines in, even in this number 22. So you're going to draw something ugly, right? That could be anything. It could be an ugly animal, or it could be something you consider ugly. Somebody considered smoking ugly, so they did somebody with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth. What else? just various things that people think are ugly. Whatever that means to you, or something you just wouldn't draw because it's so ordinary. But don't make it a minimal drawing, like drawing a button or something like that. Let's make a drawing. Get a subject that's got some content to it. Not like it's a pen on a table or something. There's not going to be much there to draw. And then it's not a very good drawing. I mean, let's have some content. Let's have some creativity. And, really sort yourself to draw something you think is ugly. It could be very epic. Like a stormy day. That could be ugly to you. Or, various things. People, animals, items, objects, something you don't like, maybe. Okay, pick that and draw it really well. And that's your assignment. But you have to have all that contrast, possibly even shading in the background. It's going to help your highlights come out, just like I talk about in almost everything we do. All right, so that's the homework. That's number 22. Animal drawing for 21. And let's get started. We only have 3 weeks left to the term, apparently, here. And we'll talk about the final shortly. And you can pick something for the final, which is basically matting and framing one of your best works from the term. You can also draw something special for the final if you want to, and you don't want to use one of the assignments. I also want to mention, if you have painted before and you really want to try it again, and you think you're fairly decent at painting, you can paint the animal drawing, or the number 22, something ugly, odd in the ordinary. You can paint those, but let's make sure you actually know what you're doing, because this is not a painting class, so I'm not really going to outline that exactly. Down here, I'll give some more demonstration to an explanation to painting if you want to use that for the color. And we'll talk about mixing paints, so I'll send a video for that if you want to use paints for that. But right up here, go for it. If you've mixed paints and used them and you want to paint this one, go ahead and try it. All right. We'll talk with you later.